meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the September 18th edition of the Gateway API Sync. As always, this meeting is covered under the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which effectively boils down to be nice to one another. So please do be nice to one another. Throughout the meeting, if you need to interject or ask questions, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. It's very helpful for us to coordinate questions and comments and stuff like that and keep things flowing. We have a bit of agenda today. If you want to add something to the agenda now, or if you think of something while we're talking, it's an open agenda. Please do feel free to add your item above the triage section in the meeting notes. I don't think I see anybody that I haven't seen before. So I think we'll go right into the agenda unless anybody, I'll take a couple seconds if anybody wants to introduce themselves or talk about something that, or just say hi and say, hey, I'm working on Gateway API. We'd love to hear from you. We'll give a couple seconds for that and then we'll start on the agenda. Okay, starting on the agenda here. Hopefully it's visible. Rob, you want to go ahead and start talking about V081?
Yeah, I can do that. So we released 081 last week, and this was to fix one bug, but in the process of fixing one bug, we created another bug. Hurrah. But accidentally in the process of releasing, usually we would tag a V0.1 8.1 patch release on the release 08 branch. Unfortunately, we mixed it up and tagged on main. So what that means, is relatively minor, but it means that HV route timeouts actually got included in the experimental CRD, the experimental version of HV route. I'm not sure what the best path forward here is. We very clearly need process improvements, which we can work on, but also it's unclear if we should create a 082, which removes timeouts, which were accidentally added, or if we should just, say we're weeks away from a 1.0 release that will include timeouts anyways, so maybe it's not a big deal. I'm not sure, but feedback is very welcome. There's, comments welcome here or on that issue. Also, that links to a Slack thread that has some more conversation as well. Thanks to Steve for catching this one for us. Sorry that we missed this in the release process, but yeah, that is a bug that we introduced in 081. Anyone have opinions on what we should do?
It's a feature we introduced in 081.
Yeah. Yes.
Literally, yes.
It's an especially fine line between a bug and a feature this time.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure if we should remove it or not, it being V0 and then backwards compatible and all that. It does seem like some Git hooks, as much as everybody hates Git hooks, might be helpful to like catch these sort of things in the future, like disallow a tag on main, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm kind of inclined to rip it out. If it wasn't intended, rip it out.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be straightforward to release at 082. It'll just mean that we branch from release 0.8 instead of branching from main like I did when I hit the buttons last week.
Yeah, no strong opinion. The correct thing is probably 082 that rips it out. At the same time, it's coming right back in pretty soon. So
yeah, it's kind of I'll If anybody feels really strongly, it's 24/11. Please go tell us how strongly you feel about it in 24/11.
Yeah.
Yes, agreed.
So that's what's going on with V082, potentially V082. Let's talk about 1.0.
Yeah, I just linked the release blockers. I tried to add the ones that I thought could use some discussion in triage at the end. So we don't need to spend much time on this now. Just, a reminder, 1.0 is top of mind for all of us. We are really working to make sure that we can get this released in October, which means, realistically, we need to be feature complete by end of this month. This list does look longer than I think it is in reality because we have a combination of PRs and issues, and some of the PRs close out some of the issues. At least one of the PRs closes out multiple issues. So I think we are getting closer, but definitely if you're looking for things to prioritize as far as review, work, etc., these are the things. So yeah. And if there's anything that we've missed that you think, yeah, we really shouldn't release 1.0 without X, and it's not on that list, please, speak up sooner than later.
Yeah, now's the time to say that.
Roger that. Yeah, and then this one, we'll do this one. This one needs to be done kind of at the end, but all of them are pretty much accounted for at this point. And I think we've been doing kind of checking in as maintainers and keeping on top of the in progress to make sure nothing gets out of band. So I think the most helpful thing that we can get from people right now is very prescriptive PR review comments. Not just especially during these next few weeks, maybe more so than ever. It's always good to do this, but when you have PR review comments, we do want them. We want to get things right. Make sure that they have a very prescriptive, this is the action to take to resolve my comment, rather than just being nebulous and kind of like, this is a problem, but not without anything to do about it. That'll help to keep things moving forward, and hopefully we can get that RC1 out in 3 weeks, maybe. So. Anything else to say there? Should we go on to Nick's item?
That's it for me.
Yeah,
This
next one is a sort of an FYI. I kind of want to poke people to start thinking about this now. It's not a thing until much later. I think with all of the stuff that we've been doing for conformance status on gateway class, I do think that it would be very handy to have somewhere to be able to put equivalent information for things that don't use gateway and gateway class. So currently that's mesh. So I think that it would be really previously when we were talking about Gamma, we haven't wanted to add a mesh resource because there was no way to associate the mesh resource directly with the service and HTTP route binding. But I think that having a place to put the supported features, the version stuff that we've been talking about adding to gateway class status to say like, hey, does the thing that implements this gateway class actually support the versions of the CIDs that we have installed, and a bunch of other sort of informational stuff like that. It feels that it would be really good to be able to have a single place to put all that. So yeah, this is just me saying, hey, I think we should come back and revisit this discussion soon. Not we need to have this discussion today.
Yeah, and I think this is so relevant to Gamma, and I think there's a meeting tomorrow if I didn't get my calendar too messed up. So I imagine this will come up there as well.
I'm actually in Europe at the moment, so I probably won't make that meeting. So that was the other reason I wanted to call this one out.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Somehow I thought that would be. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, we can figure that out. But
no, it's currently like quarter past midnight for me. So then tomorrow's JAMA meeting is at like 1 a.m. and I'm like, no, I'm not doing that.
Wait, no, we should have the early meeting tomorrow, I think.
Is it? Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I
Yeah,
hope.
that one is at like 5 p.m. Yeah, but I'm at like an offsite, and I about an offsite
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well. So
that's
there's a
fine.
good chance I
That's
won't
fine.
make it for that reason too.
Yeah, cool. All right, I agreed. I'm really interested in a mesh resource as well, but I'm also not. I think I'd defer to Flynn, Keith, John, etc. There as well. But I think we're adding real value to Gateway class, and I would like to see some kind of similar concept somewhere on the mesh side.
Same.
Yeah, that was all I was trying to say. It's just please consider.
And then the logo proposal, Rob.
Shane, I use dark mode on GitHub, and I think, do you use dark mode on GitHub as well?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't use dark mode in Docs, and I dropped it in Docs because I thought it would be easier to see in Docs, but unfortunately, it's not easy to see here either. But magic. Okay.
Let there be light.
Thank you. Yeah. So we'd been looking for a new logo for Gateway API. We'd been looking for a new logo for a bit, but I will be the first to say I am not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. And so there was an old issue asking about a logo for Gateway API, which kind of brought back to life. And I actually reached out to Tim Hawken, who had done the original Kubernetes logo, and I just asked him, "Hey, do you have any tips for who could come up with a Gateway logo for us?" And he had this idea. He will not be offended in any way if we don't go with it. But this is basically his attempt at merging the Kubernetes logo with that of a black hole. And seems like an interesting concept. I just added some basic text to it, but there's not much to it. The actual graphic is his. So there's an issue that's linked in that thread. Really, I think this will be lazy consensus of if anyone wants to provide alternatives, very welcome to provide alternatives. If not, we may just end up going forward with this. I just kind of picked end of September for a rough date. The goal is to have a logo as part of our 1.0 release. This is currently the front runner because it's the only one that exists. But if there are other options, that's great too. Dave, you got a question, comment?
More of a no thanks. I saw the picture in the notes, and I'm like, is it trying to be a black hole? I'm like, there's no way we want this to be a black hole. Also,
Wormhole. You have to say wormhole. And physics people, leave me alone. It's
well, technically, this diagram with the weights, it's gravity, right? And then black hole goes to like a singular point because it's heavy. I would recommend a compass because it kind of ties to the routing bit of gateways. But
you can draw it up.
yeah, it's gonna be worse than this though.
I don't like
welcome,
the
yeah.
black hole connotation either. I understand that, to my understanding, theoretically black holes are wormholes, but if we do go with this, we should say it's a wormhole, because a wormhole is a gateway between two places. A black hole is where things go to never exist again in our space.
Does wormhole have gravity?
Dude, I don't.
So yes, so an Einstein-Rosen bridge is a wormhole that connects a black hole to the postulated white hole.
Right.
So
we don't have to we don't have to get that into it though, right? We could
so
just
yes,
don't call
yes,
it a black hole.
The short answer is yes, but yeah, like I think it would be easy for the connotations to be hard to read. So a compass is probably just as good, to be honest. I mean, it would be nice if we could figure out some way to have like.
When I see this,
I think it would be nice if we could figure out some way to have like something that literally was a gateway that also the Kubernetes simple somehow, and I just haven't been able to come up with the right way to do that. But yeah, like as Rob says, right now we have one option, and that's it.
Grant likes Spider-Man, so that's 2 votes for Spider-Man. There is always, we could always O'Reilly it and just pick an animal. It's on the table.
Yeah, I think the biggest blocker here is, as much as we can come up with ideas, I know I personally can't translate ideas into anything that looks roughly as good as this. But if anyone can, ideas are, alternatives are very welcome here. If we do have more than one, I anticipate that we'll turn this into a vote at the end of September. If this remains the only option, then nothing to vote on, really.
It won't be a vote. Yeah.
Yeah.
Based on the black hole, you'll accept the kitchen sink as well.
Post it in the comment. Do it. I might vote for a picture of a kitchen sink for our logo, actually. I might do it.
Why are people so unkind?
Was unkind. It's just I feel like if Dave actually posts a picture of a kitchen
That's
sink, here's the logo I want to do. I feel obligated to +1 it.
That is an Australian specific reference. I'm sorry. There was a singer who was very famous. His name was Kamal, and his famous quote was that he would always say, "Why are people so unkind?"
So anyway, all lols aside, by the end of the month, if we have no other contenders, I think we're pretty much set on, well, we'll pick the one thing that's there, and it will be this wormhole depiction. And if anybody has anything that they want to add, even if you're a little bit of, you could even post something that was kind of drafty, I think. And if people really liked it, we could probably find somebody who could like, level it up for us or something. If you don't usually do graphic art. So don't be afraid to put something out there that you're like, oh, this is kind of blah. If the concept is good, people might rally around it. So please do check in.
Yes,
that's
please do. Yep.
2202 if you have any ideas. We'll give a brief second if there's lots of chat I missed. Is there anything going on there? We'll give a couple seconds if anybody has any last minute things before we get into triage, and then we'll start on triage. Alrighty. First one. Actually, let me just open them all up. I should have done this earlier, but I didn't. I have slow internet. All right. Add handling for indistinct parent refs with conformance tests. And yeah, I think this is the one where I was pretty happy with it. What's left on this one to talk about?
Okay, so I had a comment here, and I thought it might be useful just to discuss it in a larger audience because so for context, Nick added this PR. I think it's very simple, straightforward in the sense it's just saying, hey, if you've got more than one parent ref pointing to the same resource, they both need to specify something that's more specific, like a section name, a port, whatever, right? And specifically, you can't have one with a section name and one with a port. They either all need to have section name or all need to have port. My question is, what happens when we get to this state, which is now called parents not distinct? Do we want to allow implementations or encourage implementations to accept one of the parents that are not distinct? Or should they not accept either? It's kind of not specified in this PR, and I thought it could benefit from broader discussion.
It should be. I agree, it should be. I guess I had kind of thought that we should not accept either because there's no our usual conflict resolution mechanisms don't work because it's by definition it has to be the same object. So there's no like creation time difference. There's nothing about the object is different.
I mean, you could say I'm going to accept the first parent ref in the list, and any subsequent ones I'm just going to say are not distinct, so I'm not going to care about them. The thing that leads me to that preference is just being a little bit kinder to users, in the sense of, I said the same thing twice, and the new thing that I just added can be not accepted, but I don't want to break the old thing that was already there.
I mean, I think that I agree that we should in general be kind to users, but in my mind, because this thing is in the same object, pointing to the same other object, it's like, look, I feel like this is a case of like, no, you need to fix your stuff. Like, if you're gonna have this, like, things will just break because you've given us a broken config, and so now you need to go and fix it, please. I think I'm wanting to be a bit more harsh on this one.
I guess that's fair. I mean, I think there's two different sides of this, right? There's another conversation that I'm responsible for resolving. It's in one of the release blockers that basically describes what happens when a resource that was previously accepted goes to an unaccepted state. And one of the potential outcomes there is to continue to run in the last known good state. So that would be another tack on the same thing of, we call it not accepted, but if you happen to be working on implementation that takes an awfully long time to transition between states, you may not want to. Thank you for pulling this one up, Shane. Anyway, I don't know. I think, Arco, you're saying you also prefer accepting one and not accepting the rest. Is that?
Yeah, because one is in conflict with the other, right? So if it's just one in itself is fine, the other one is conflicting. So you want to not support the other one, right? Why kick out both?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like in general, I'm supportive of that, but I think in this case, because both of those references are literally lines away from each other, it's like, there's no sort of, oh, you could accidentally do this. It's like, no, you've done this deliberately. Like, like ideally I would want to reject this in a validation webhook, but we don't want to do that anymore. So, and you can't write a cell rule that will implement this. So, like, that's why I think removing both of them is like, well, now you've broken things and you got to fix it straight away. Like, it's the sort of the tightest time frame to fix this. Like, I understand what you're saying. Like, it's probably not a big deal to just accept the first one, but we need to very clearly document that if you do this, only the first one in the list will be accepted. But again, the problem then is, what happens if you've got a list with 10 parent refs and 2 of them conflicting, and the one that's going to win is the one that's 4th in the list because there's 3 before it, and then there's the 3rd one and the 7th one that are conflicting. Like, how do you know which 2 are conflicting? Like,
what do you do? I mean, it's gonna. I don't know that we need to solve for this, but there could be implementations that are like creating these programmatically and then do some bad sorting or something. Like, make a change without doing sorting.
Yeah.
And be like, so there was they had no idea that their logic
in general
would ultimately move something.
Yeah, in general, we've tried to make it that the order of the things in a list doesn't matter. And so, like, generally, we've tried to make it so that the ordering of the things in the list doesn't matter. And so I'm kind of reluctant to have the ordering matter for this as well.
I'm very reluctant to have the ordering matter.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is there are 2 cases, right? You go from no parent refs to 2 conflicting parent refs. The second case, you have 1 valid parent ref.
But there's no way to tell by looking at a single record which of those is happening. You can tell if you've got the old state and you see an update that gives you the new state, but like, when we are talking about validity of objects, you cannot count on the fact whether or not you have observed a previous state. You only have the current state of the object to look at, like in terms of defining what the correct state is. We can't be like, well, if you've had one previously and you've added one now, like you treat it differently than if you add them both in the same operation. Like
no, you need to add
the spec
validation at that point.
Yeah, like the spec needs to say when both of these are present, and no matter how they got here, like what happens. Because eventual consistency like sucks like that.
Yeah, I think you're raising a good point that one approach here could be for us to, in the spec, not make a different, say this is an invalid state, and you can fall back to the previous. Again, the discussion of what you do when you hit an invalid state is going to depend on the implementation. Some implementations may choose to fall back to previous known good state, and others may choose to just immediately change and drop or whatever that may be. Maybe that's okay here. The other thing I wanted to cover, and I think that would line up with what Arco's saying too, because I think Arco, your main concern here is mine too, of we don't want to have something that was accepted go to not accepted because somebody added some other additional configuration. Like we don't want that blast radius to be bigger than it needs to be. Yes. Basically.
Yeah. And in general, I'm supportive of that when it's cross objects. When it's the same object, I'm less supportive. And that's why I think this one should be different, is because this is within the same object. Like this is literally, you have one HTTP route that has two references to the same gateway that are conflicting. And so that's why I'm like, this is a very specific circumstance where I think it's okay to be much less accepting than we normally would be. If it was like you've got two HTTP routes and they're separate objects and there's a conflict, like, yeah, sure, that's fine. But this is like, it has to be, by definition, within the same route object pointing to like the same gateway object in a way that is not distinct enough. And so that's the only time when this is going to arise, is you have the same route object having two parent refs that both point to the same gateway object, and you don't have enough information in them to be able to choose which of the listeners it should be bound to. Like, even if you the thing is, if you have parent ref, so if you go back to that example that you showed, Rob, the that's your third tab from the right, Shane.
Yeah, it's Shane.
One more.
Yeah.
One more back to the left. Yeah, that one. If you go down to this example, the thing that that we're not sort of talking about.
It was where you were. Sorry, Shane.
Yeah.
I was like, what in the world is this one right here, right? Okay, go on.
No, yeah, this one, yes. So only having the name of an object means that you should bind to all listeners in that object, not any one particular listener. But then the one underneath it says you should only bind to one particular listener. Right? There's literally a conflict in the two things that you have asked for here. One of them says, please bind to all listeners, and the other one says, only bind to a single listener. Like, it's actually not possible to realize both of those at once. Does that make sense? So if you choose the first one in this case, you're actually going to bind to all the listeners.
Yeah. Which to me feels like fine. You're already doing a superset of what the next one is. So we'll just say, hey, the next one is not distinct.
But what if your intention was to just bind to one of them? And so you started listening on a bunch of listeners you didn't intend to.
I mean, you already had that problem. I mean, you're going to see it. You're going to see, hey, there's an error in, I mean, hopefully you're going to see there's an error in route status. I also, Nick, you said something earlier that I am starting to question. you mentioned that, hey, maybe we could solve this with cell, but you're not sure if it's possible. But I think it would be ugly, but maybe possible to solve this with validation. And if we can solve this with validation, the rest of the conversation becomes moot point.
Yes, 100%. It would be much preferable. It was much more preferable to do this with validation. Yes, because then, as Arco says in the chat, then you never have this problem come up, because either the route points to no parent refs, or it had at least one valid parent ref beforehand, and it doesn't matter that you can't fully reconcile this object because the object has never persisted with the thing. I mean, the objections that I have to sort of the last known good state thing is in general that when you do that, the state of the declarative state that you have requested is never reachable. Like you can't, but there's nothing to indicate that it's never reachable, right? Like the object you have requested a state that is not deliverable, and so but you don't, like there's nothing on the object to say this is what you request is never going to be reachable.
Well, hold on. I mean, isn't that true of many things? Like I request a gateway address that can't be assigned, right?
I'm fixing it.
That's no.
Yeah,
I'm fixing that one.
Yeah, but so that if we're gonna support that sort of hey, last known good thing, then there needs to be very clear condition signals to say the thing you have requested is never going to succeed. And by the way, you're still running with the old version of the config. Like there needs to be some way on the object to make it very clear that the old version of the config is still in use, and there needs to be a condition that we add or something like that lets people know that this implementation leaves your old config running. It doesn't just take all the config away when there's conflict.
Yeah. I agree.
There's always this dichotomy with Kubernetes API development where you have a state that you don't want to be able to get to, so you try to validate against it, and often you end up with logic that handles when it would get through validation or something like that. Like, right? There's almost always you have to validate and potentially know what you're going to do. If there's some way to get through it without validation, you have to know what status you can put on it so that somebody can kind of at least know that the problem occurred, right?
Yes.
Because especially with like cross object, although that's I don't think necessarily at play here, but with cross object validation, that's always best effort. So you have to have some kind of fallback.
Yes. But yeah, so
I guess I don't even know what we're saying other than we just need a status now, is like to indicate that this happens, or validation.
In this case, I think validation is hopefully the solution, but need to sketch that out a little bit, to make sure.
That's what I was like. That was the first thought. I was saying, usually you just try to validate against these conditions. So if we can do that with cell, that would be fantastic. I can't see it in my head right now, but
yeah, it feels like it's going to be gross. If it works, it'll be gross, but
it'll be long. Yeah. But so yes, I think so. To answer the question, like it's not the end of the world if we pick a winner. Like as long as we're very clear about which winner gets picked, that is not a thing that can be implementation specific. Like that is a thing that has to be defined in the spec. Like, so if we want to pick a winner, then that's fine, but we have to have very clear rules about how the winner gets picked. I would rather it be not the first item in the list, but there is not, I don't want the list order to matter, but there are not very many other good options for picking a winner, because you can't use a creation time, you can't use like
the second best thing would be the most restrictive winner. Maybe. I mean, not necessarily for people's traffic falling off the map, but for security reasons, wouldn't the most restrictive thing
probably
be better?
Yes, the most specific one, yes, winning would be better. But again, then, which is more specific, picking a section name or having a port?
Yeah, you'd have to come up with literal rules, like you said.
You're going to have every single one of the possible cases defined as to which one is the winner in those cases. Which kind of sucks too. Yeah. That's why I think this is one of those things where this is why a lot of the time I'm like, it's better to just throw everything out, because once you start defining the rules for this, you have to define all the rules so that you catch all of the edge cases.
Imagine that. Well, we still have a few triage
We've got a lot
items
to
and
talk
20
about, so we
minutes
should,
left.
yeah.
What do we need here to move forward asynchronously?
I think we should look into Cell. I think that's it. I started talking
I will
with
put
Gaurav, who. Go ahead.
I'll put some of my thoughts on this comment later when I have a chance to like write them down, and I'm also when it's not like nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, when I can be a bit more coherent. But I do agree that if we can solve this problem with Cell, it may actually be better. I mean, if we can make it so that we have cell validation to make sure that you can't have indistinct parent refs, then we can probably throw this PR away.
Yep.
Because then it will not be possible to arrive in this state.
Roger that.
So we don't need to handle the state. So, and I would be fine with that. I won't be mad.
Roger that. Next up, check resolve ref conditions and gateway conformance tests. Rob, I think.
Yeah, I added this one. This one is one that I think could use another look. Shane, you actually pinged a bunch of people this morning. I'm a little concerned on this one that we may be missing some tests. What it does is it adds a universal check. So those are always scary. Not universal, but almost every conformance test calls this function of gateway must be accepted or something like that. And it also expects that every listener has a resolve refs specified to true as well in status. I think that's reasonable. I'm just a little concerned that we have some test somewhere that intentionally has a listener that is to an invalid something, right? And just want to, if conformance reviewers, approvers, whatever, could take another look at this one, it would make me feel better. This is something that as part of this 1.0 push, we're trying to make sure everything in core and extended has conformance test coverage. This is one of the last gaps. So we are trying to prioritize it, but just would appreciate some additional eyes on this one in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to be clear that it's okay that implementations need to change this behavior if they're not like that's acceptable. The thing that would not be acceptable is, if this forces it to always be true and we have a conformance test that relies on resolve refs being false, then that would be a problem because then the conformance test is not going to work properly. It's not going to produce the result we expect. But I think that as part of going to GA, if we say, no, now you have to always have to populate this resolve refs condition, I think that's acceptable in my mind.
Okay. So I will try to take a look at this. And anybody else who has some time, that's poll 2247. This needs a couple extra eyes because it may have some implications a little bit further than we would have expected. GEP 1762 in cluster gateway deployments. Nick, I assume or Rob, I assume you put this one on the agenda as well.
I don't know. I know, Nick has been trying to push this one forward. John has done a lot of work on this one. But yeah, this is one that I've been reviewing a bunch as well. I think this is basically ready to go now, but I don't want to unilaterally approve it. This is much smaller in scope than it was initially. This is really just labels and annotations that you can specify in gateway infrastructure. And those will get passed through to related resources that are provisioned as a result of the gateway. That could be, in cluster or otherwise. John, I think you also added I know you also added some other guidance in here that could probably use some reviews from people who are actually writing in cluster implementations. That is not me, so I'm not the best reviewer of this gap. But I don't know if there's anything in particular. John, I don't know if you're on the call, but if there's anything you want to call out.
I stepped away but came back about 30 seconds ago, so I may have missed a bit. But nothing I particularly want to call out, but I agree. If you're an implementation, please take a look. And if not, I think I addressed all the comments. So unless Rob just said something otherwise, I assume this is.
Yeah, no, I think
this is super close. I've just got to do it. I'll do another pass tomorrow my time. And like, yeah, I think it looks pretty good to me. Just having a very quick look right now.
Cool. Yeah, I spit out a lot of stuff, so I'll probably, once that merges, open up a new one, adding that stuff as a follow-up one that then we can be controversial. This was intended to be really small and not controversial. So
yes, turns out, as has happened many times, we're like, oh, this is going to be small and not controversial, and we're like, oh no, actually, it's much bigger than we thought it was, and it's more controversial.
This one I expected to be controversial, so it was no problem here.
Yeah.
I was just waiting to see how much we had to whittle away. But
but I think the labels annotation support, like, I think it's pretty uncontroversial, but people will need that. Yeah. So I will check that one tomorrow.
Okay. Expand and clarify listener's definition.
So
didn't we end up with
current state?
Go ahead.
The current state is this: is that I wrote a small epistle on the bottom about like, and so I really need people to read what I wrote there and tell me if what I have said makes sense. The thing that I'm really pushing for on this is that I think it's really important that we sort of record that for a variety of reasons, in the clear text HTTP case, you need to treat the hostname match as sort of a separate level of matching to the other one, because in the TLS cases, it happens that way anyway. You have to match the SNI first and then do host header matching. And if your SNI does not match your host header, you can cause weird security shenanigans to happen because you're sort of violating the agreement that you made with your TLS match. Is sort of how I would summarize it.
Yeah, and I asked a question on there too that I think is basically along the same lines, but I'm interested. I think the implementations right now that are doing cascading here across listeners tend to be Nginx based or related. And so I'm trying to understand how that works with HTTPS, because it does at least seem, possible that you could do that with clear text HTTP, but it's not clear to me what's happening for HTTPS, and it's confusing to have different behavior, I think, but also, like you're saying, not safe to have cascading with HTTPS. I don't know. So if anyone is worth so again, for a little bit more context, this is I think the comment right up that's in screen right here is helpful in the sense that some implementations are going to cascade that match. I think many Envoy implementations are not going to, but there's a mix here. If you haven't seen this before, please do take a look, because your implementation almost certainly has made a choice here, and it was not clear in the spec what we expected, and we are trying to make a choice retroactively. There was unwritten expectations that were broken.
That's the best way to say it. Yeah,
that's so yeah.
We expected. I mean, the shortest way to say this is we kind of expected things to work the way that they do in Envoy, for better or for worse. It was the original expectation, and like, the standard way that you do the Nginx rules doesn't work like that, and so that's why a lot of the recommendations here is like, hey, it's not fair at this point to be like, no, you have to make it work like Envoy when that's not how your implementation works. Like, that's not cool. But like, equally, that is absolutely what we intended. It's just that we never actually wrote down the language in a clear enough way. And so now figuring out how to write the language down in a clear enough way is one problem.
Given how much time has been spent here, and it looks like how much more could be spent here, I think it's pertinent to say that this is potentially the single greatest threat to releasing on time in the
Yes,
2 to 3 week
100%.
RC1 window that we have.
Yep.
Is
Yes.
there a stopgap that we can get to the one with here that I'm not seeing? Like, is there something we can do? I vaguely remember us
It's just-
talking about having like a documentation change that could hold us over for the time being.
I think what we have suggested may be necessary here is providing a suggestion or a should instead of
A
a
recommendation. It needs to be a
Yeah.
recommendation, not a must. Yeah, like we can't provide a must. Absolutely not. But we should.
Right.
But
Yes, this is the
I would
should,
like
yes.
to provide a strong recommendation using a should. And so it's
And
okay if you don't. We won't enforce it at
That's
this
here.
time. Yeah, but we really want to make it clear to people that you should try to do it. Yeah. Yes.
It
Okay.
That's me
does
trying to
seem
write.
like
Yeah.
it does seem like we may want to have a must, or we probably do need to have a must for HPS, right? This is really
Yes.
just a should for clear text HP.
Yes. So So Mikhail asked in the chat, is there 2 levels of host header matching? No, there's 1 level of host header matching, but the host header matching is done before any other matching. So like once you host header, whether it's host name matching is done before any other matching, regardless of whether it's host matching based on the SNI and then checking the host header matches the SNI is actually a thing that you should do, but it's actually not straightforward to do that. But all the other matching, the path matching, any other header matching is done separately, sort of in Envoy by default. And so again, I am sorry that we didn't know, we didn't think about our own sort of biases here, and sort of we assumed that that's how everything worked. But again, I think that assumption is also based on the fact that for HTTPS, you have to match a host name, being the SNI first, before you get access to the unencrypted traffic. And it is very important that you make sure that the host header matches the exact host name that was used in the certificate negotiation. So if the certificate said star, and there is a more specific host name, you can't cascade when it's been TLS'd, because you're breaking the TLS contract.
Roger that.
What I would like is other people to read what I have put here. I understand it's very long. I would have liked to have been shorter, but I was trying to say it in a few different ways. And we need some more conversation on this one, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, you're right, John. There's 2 levels. Yeah.
Okay.
For this one, so Mikhail said, do we need conformance test 2 for this one? Because it will be a should for clear text. We cannot have conformance tests for should. We may need to have conformance tests for HTTPS though, because it is important that you make sure that if you set an SNI and you supply a different host header, that your request should be rejected. And we definitely do not have tests that test that at the moment. I mean,
I'm hesitant to derail
Dave,
this because I didn't read this, but that last comment, I'm not sure if there was missing nuance because as a simplification, but are we taking into account the whole HTTP 2 421 misdirected garbage?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yes. So to some extent, yeah, but I mean, we do need to take that into account, but yeah, yes, we need to take that into account, but it's very hard to write rules for that.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I
Yeah.
part of the spec and everything. I just want to make sure that folks are aware.
Yeah.
And I thought everyone was, but Cool.
Yeah, it burned us. That burned us on Contour for some time. Yeah, certain browsers and operating systems would just not work with Contour's TLS support for a while. It took us a while to figure out that specific HTTP2 connection coalescing and 421 redirects did not work under certain combinations of OS and browser.
David asked a question about should being an opt-in conformance test using a feature flag, and I don't think historically we've done that.
So
It could be.
I could see that. Yeah.
But in this case, it's a bit complicated to write conformance tests for it as well. Like,
yeah.
Generally,
so
ideally, yes,
been for like extended features. So like yeah, it's not something that
has
everybody
been
needs to
features,
do
not behaviors. Yeah.
And this is not a situation where we want to have like not I don't think this is a situation where we want to have like cascading or not cascading is like a feature that you opt into. It gets confused. This gets confusing for users.
Not to open too much of a can of worms here, but there may be a case to be made for something like a characteristic. It's not really a feature, but it's a way an implementation handles a thing. So one of the things I've been thinking about is I've been working through potentially allowing two different ways for implementations to handle invalid or partially invalid routes. Is that one characteristic may be falling back to last known good state, and another one may be dropping everything. Yeah, I don't know. So this is more not so much a feature as it's just a way an implementation behaves.
Yeah,
what's that?
I think.
Did we used to call that annotations? Is that what we used to characteristics?
Why must you hurt me so, Shane? Why must you hurt me so?
Go on, sorry.
Yeah, so I think this one needs more discussion on it, sadly, and I agree that it is definitely the biggest risk.
All right, lots of
we're almost out of time, so let's hit the last one.
Let's pop it real quick. All right, client certificate validation. This adds the API. Arco, do you want to talk about this one real quick?
Yeah, I see that a similar API got merged, right? The backend TLS policy. And so to me, this is sort of a subset of those fields. So if I can get any guidance on what I can add, remove, edit in this PR, that would be great.
I'll see what I can do. Like, I'll be honest, man, like it's coming down to the wire for being able to include it in 1.0 though. We're kind of running out of time. Yeah.
My own personal perspective is this belongs in the API, but it is not a good idea to rush any review that requires thought around TLS. And I'm really hesitant, although it makes sense. Like, this makes sense to me on the surface. There's just so many different considerations here that I feel like I might miss if I'm not super careful. Just as a reviewer, and my bandwidth between now and 1.0 is very, very tough, very limited. I definitely want this in the API. I can't commit that I'll have time to review it and give it the attention it needs to really get it in between now and 1.0.
Sounds good. Should I bring this up after KubeCon NA?
Yeah, or even
even
there, maybe, you know, I mean, if you'll be there, but either way, yeah, after it would be great too.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll be there. But yeah,
Nick and Rob can add on to this, but at least from my perspective, it seems like most people should realize that GEP stuff, that if it isn't a release blocker, may at bare minimum, may not get any attention until RC1, which we expect to be within the next 2 to 3 weeks, hopefully. Bare minimum.
Yeah.
But more realistically, a lot of things are going to pick up after KubeCon Chicago. That's more realistic, all things considered.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you. We
Look at that,
appreciate you pushing things forward. This is just we've learned a lot about how everything is just coming down to the wire on this GA. And actually, we're going to have a talk at Contributor Summit about that and kind of the lessons learned from how hard it was to make this GA happen. So thank you for bearing with us. We're almost to the finish line, but it's actually the starting line. So that'll be fun. But yeah. Okay. We got through all the triage. Thank you.
And we ran out of time. So
just in time. Yep. Thank you, everyone, for your time. We'll see you next time. Keep in mind that we do have the time changes, and I still haven't gotten the calendar updated. I'm sorry. I'll get the calendar updated shortly. Where I think we get one more Monday meeting, and then we have a Tuesday meeting at the beginning of the month. So just keep that in mind.
Thanks.
Cheers, everyone.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.